I never thought business betrayal would come from someone who shared my last name. Not from a competitor, not from a stranger, but from my own sister. For 3 years, I worked day and night building a small business from nothing. And while I believed we were building it together, she was quietly taking the profits for herself. By the time I discovered the truth, tens of thousands of dollars were gone. And the worst part? She still thought I would never find out. My name is Lauren, and 3 years ago I started a small online business selling handmade home decor. It began in the spare bedroom of my apartment. Just me, a laptop, a cheap crafting table, and a dream that maybe, just maybe, I could build something of my own. At first, it was slow. 1 order a week, then 2, then 5. But something about the designs started catching people's attention. Soon, I was shipping orders across the country. Customers from California, Texas, even a few from overseas. For the first time in my life, I felt proud of something I had built with my own hands. That's when my younger sister, Melissa, offered to help. Melissa had always been charming. The kind of person who could walk into a room and instantly make people laugh. She told me she believed in my business, said she wanted to help it grow. At the time, I thought I was lucky. Running a small business alone is exhausting. Handling customer messages, packaging orders, updating the website, managing payments, it never stops. So when Melissa offered to manage the finances and bookkeeping, it felt like a blessing. "Let me handle the boring stuff," she said one night while we were packing orders. "You focus on the creative side. That's what you're good at." I trusted her. She was my sister, after all. And for a while, everything seemed perfect. The business kept growing. Orders doubled, then tripled. Money was coming in faster than ever. But something started to feel off. Every time I asked about profits, Melissa had an answer ready. Shipping costs went up. Taxes took more than expected. We had to reinvest in supplies. At first, it sounded reasonable. Running a business always has expenses. Still, the numbers never quite made sense. The sales were clearly increasing, yet somehow the profits always seemed smaller than they should have been. I told myself I was overthinking. After all, what kind of person suspects family theft from their own sister? But deep down, a quiet voice kept whispering the same unsettling thought. Something isn't right. And the day I finally opened the accounting file she didn't think I would ever see, I realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was business betrayal, and the beginning of a very personal kind of revenge. At first, I tried to silence the suspicion in my head. Running a small business is messy. Numbers shift, expenses appear, profits fluctuate. That's normal. At least that's what I kept telling myself. But the strange thing about business betrayal is that it rarely begins with something obvious. It starts with tiny details, little things that don't quite add up. And once you notice them, you can't stop noticing more. Melissa had full access to our payment systems, the website revenue, the bank account, the bookkeeping software, all of it. At the time, I believed it made sense. I was drowning in orders, production schedules, and customer requests. Meanwhile, she seemed perfectly happy handling spreadsheets and invoices. Or at least that's what she said. "Trust me," she would laugh whenever I asked about the finances. "You'd fall asleep if you saw how boring this stuff is." And I believed her, because trusting family feels natural. You don't expect family theft from someone who grew up in the same house as you, someone who shared childhood birthdays, Christmas mornings, and late-night conversations about our dreams. Melissa used to tell everyone she was proud of me. "She built this whole thing from scratch," she would say to friends, and every time she said it, I felt grateful. Grateful that she supported me, grateful that she believed in the business, grateful that I didn't have to do everything alone. But over time, something subtle began to change. Whenever the topic of profits came up, Melissa grew defensive. Not angry, just slightly irritated, like the question itself bothered her. "Why are you worrying about money right now?" she once asked. "We're still growing. That's what matters." Another time, when I mentioned the sales numbers seemed higher than the reported profit, she sighed dramatically. "You know how taxes work, Lauren. It's not as simple as you think." Maybe she was right. After all, I wasn't the financial expert. That was her role. Still, the uneasiness kept growing because the business was thriving. Every month, our website traffic increased, social media orders multiplied. Our products were even featured in a small online magazine. From the outside, everything looked successful. Yet, somehow, I was barely paying myself. Meanwhile, Melissa always seemed comfortable. New clothes, weekend trips, a brand new phone. Whenever I noticed, she brushed it off casually. "Credit cards," she joked. But a strange thought slowly formed in the back of my mind, a thought I didn't want to believe. What if this wasn't just messy bookkeeping? What if something much darker was happening? Because if the numbers I was seeing were correct, then someone was taking money from the business. And if that was true, it wasn't just business betrayal anymore. It was family theft. And I had no idea how deep it went. But soon, I was about to find out. And when I did, it would change the way I looked at my sister forever. And it would start a quiet plan for revenge she never saw coming. The moment suspicion enters your mind, everything starts to look different. Little details you ignored before suddenly feel important. Conversations replay in your head. Numbers begin to matter. And silence becomes suspicious. That's exactly what happened to me. Because once I started paying attention, the signs of business betrayal were everywhere. I just hadn't wanted to see them before. One evening, after finishing a long day of packing orders, I checked the website dashboard. Sales for that week were incredible, almost $12,000. I stared at the number for a moment, feeling a spark of pride. 3 years earlier, I had celebrated my first $100 sale. Now we were doing that in a single hour. Naturally, I opened the financial report Melissa had sent earlier that week. According to her spreadsheet, our profit for the month was barely $3,000. That didn't make sense. Even after expenses, supplies, and taxes, the difference felt huge. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, trying to convince myself I just didn't understand the accounting, but the uneasiness wouldn't go away. The next day, I asked Melissa about it, casually, carefully. "Hey," I said while we were labeling packages, "I was looking at the sales numbers yesterday." She didn't look up. "Okay." The profits seem a little lower than I expected. For a split second, her hands stopped moving. Just a tiny pause. Then she shrugged. "Shipping costs have gone crazy lately." Her tone was light. Too light. "Plus, we bought a lot of supplies last month." I nodded slowly. It sounded reasonable, but something about her reaction felt rehearsed, like she had answered that question before. Over the next few weeks, I began quietly paying closer attention. Not accusing, not confronting, just observing. And that's when the pattern appeared. Every time revenue increased, Melissa claimed costs increased too. If sales doubled, Melissa claimed costs doubled. If orders exploded, she said we had to reinvest everything. The math never seemed to work in our favor, but it always worked in hers. Because Melissa's lifestyle was changing, slowly, subtly, but noticeably. New designer bags, dinner photos at expensive restaurants, a weekend trip to Miami she claimed was spontaneous. Meanwhile, I was still paying myself the same modest salary from a business that was clearly growing. That's when the thought I had been avoiding finally surfaced. What if this wasn't poor accounting? What if this was family theft? The idea made my stomach twist. No one wants to believe their own sibling is capable of something like that. But the numbers refused to lie. And once that thought entered my mind, another followed. If Melissa really was stealing from the business, then this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was full-blown business betrayal. And if that turned out to be true, I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't explode in anger. I wouldn't start a screaming fight. Because the most effective revenge isn't loud. It's patient. And at that moment, a quiet plan was already beginning to form in my mind. For weeks, I lived with the suspicion quietly sitting in the back of my mind. I didn't confront Melissa. I didn't accuse her. Instead, I watched. Because if there really was business betrayal happening, I needed proof. Not guesses, not feelings. Proof. And proof takes patience. One night, Melissa texted me saying she wouldn't be coming by the workshop. "Dinner with friends," she wrote. Normally, that wouldn't matter, but that evening, something pushed me to finally do what I had been avoiding. I opened the accounting software. Melissa had always handled it. She said it was complicated, boring, full of confusing tax rules. But when I logged in, I realized something surprising. The system wasn't complicated at all. It was just numbers, transactions, transfers, and history. Lots of history. At first, everything looked normal. Payments from customers, shipping fees, supply purchases. Then I noticed a small transfer, $800. The description said marketing expense. That seemed reasonable, but when I clicked the details, the payment didn't go to a marketing company, it went to a personal account. Melissa's personal account. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. Maybe it was a reimbursement. Maybe she paid for something personally. I kept scrolling, and then I saw another one, $1,200, then another, $600. Different descriptions, software tools, supplier adjustment, operational cost, but every single one went to the same place, her bank account. My hands started shaking as I dug deeper. The transfers went back months, then further, over a year. Small amounts at first, $200, $300, amounts easy to hide inside normal business expenses. But over time, they grew, larger, more frequent, bolder. When I finally added them together, the total made my stomach drop. $47,000, almost $50,000, gone. Taken quietly from the business I built, taken by the one person I trusted most. This wasn't sloppy bookkeeping. This wasn't confusion. This was deliberate family theft. I sat in silence for a long time, just staring at the numbers, feeling a strange mix of anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. Melissa hadn't just stolen money, she had stolen trust. She had smiled, laughed, and worked beside me while quietly draining the business. That kind of business betrayal doesn't just hurt financially, it changes how you see someone forever. And at that moment, something inside me shifted, because I realized something important. Melissa thought she was smarter than me. She thought I would never look, never question, never discover the truth. But now that I knew, I had a choice. I could confront her, or I could wait. And if there's one thing I've learned about revenge, it's that patience makes it far more powerful. So instead of reacting, I started planning. That night, I didn't call Melissa. I didn't send an angry text. I didn't demand an explanation. Instead, I closed my laptop and sat quietly in the dark for a long time. Because reacting emotionally would only help her. If this was truly business betrayal, then Melissa had already prepared excuses, gaslighting, deflection, maybe even turning the situation around to make me feel guilty. No. If I wanted real answers and real justice, I needed patience. And patience is the most dangerous weapon in revenge. The next morning, I acted like nothing had changed. Melissa came into the workshop around noon, carrying coffee and smiling like usual. "Morning, boss," she joked. I smiled back. "Morning." We packed orders together, talked about customer messages, discussed a new product idea. From the outside, everything looked normal, but inside, I was watching everything. Every word, every reaction. Because once you know family theft is happening, small behaviors suddenly reveal a lot. Over the next few days, I began quietly preparing. First, I downloaded every financial record from the business: invoices, bank statements, transfer histories, everything. If Melissa ever tried to deny what she'd done, the numbers would speak for themselves. Then I opened a second business account, one she didn't know about. I didn't move money yet, I just prepared it. Because the goal of revenge wasn't anger, it was control. And control begins with information. But the most important step came a week later. I told Melissa something she clearly loved hearing. "I've been thinking," I said casually while we were organizing supplies. Her eyes lit up. "About what?" "The business is growing faster than I expected." She nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly what I've been saying. So maybe it's time to expand." Now she looked truly excited. "Like hiring more help?" "Maybe," I said, "or opening a physical store someday." Her smile widened, and in that moment, I saw something in her eyes. Not pride, not happiness, greed. Melissa believed the business was about to become much bigger, which meant, in her mind, the money would become much bigger too. That was the moment I understood something clearly. She wasn't planning to stop. The family theft would only grow. The business betrayal would only deepen. And that realization made my next decision very easy. Because if Melissa thought she could quietly steal from me forever, then she had no idea the kind of revenge that was already unfolding. And the most ironic part? She was about to help me make it happen. Once I understood how Melissa had been stealing from the business, everything became clearer. Her strategy was simple: small transfers, hidden inside normal expenses, amounts just small enough that no one would question them. It was careful, calculated, classic family theft disguised as routine business activity. And honestly, it probably would have worked forever if I hadn't looked. But now that I knew about the business betrayal, I had something even more powerful than anger. I had time, and time makes revenge far more effective. Over the next month, I began quietly changing how the business operated, not in a way that would alarm Melissa, just small adjustments. First, I moved our main payment processor to a new account. I told her it was for tax organization. She didn't question it. In fact, she seemed relieved. "Less paperwork for me," she laughed. What she didn't realize was that the new account sent automatic transaction reports directly to my email, not hers. Next, I introduced a new system for expense approvals. Again, I presented it as something positive. "We're growing," I told her. "Eventually, we'll need investors or loans. Our financial records need to look more professional." Melissa nodded quickly. She loved the idea of the business looking bigger, more legitimate, more profitable. Ironically, the same changes that made her excited also made stealing much harder. Every expense now required documentation, every transfer required notes, and every record copied to me. But the most important part of my plan wasn't blocking the theft. It was letting Melissa believe she could still get away with it. Because people committing business betrayal often make the same mistake. They grow confident, then careless. And that's exactly what happened. A few weeks later, I saw it. Another transfer, $1,500, labeled as vendor payment, but the money went directly to her personal account. Melissa clearly thought nothing had changed. She assumed her system was still invisible. She didn't realize I was now tracking every dollar. Instead of confronting her, I did something even more interesting. I waited and I watched. Because the longer someone believes their family theft is hidden, the bolder they become. And Melissa was becoming very bold. Transfers grew larger, more frequent, 2,000, 3,000, each one strengthening my case, each one deepening the evidence of business betrayal. By the end of that month, the total amount she had taken had passed $60,000. $60,000 from the business I built with sleepless nights and endless work. But strangely, I no longer felt angry. I felt calm, because Melissa still believed she was winning. She had no idea the kind of revenge I was preparing was almost ready. And when the moment finally came, she wouldn't just lose the money she stole, she would lose something far more valuable, her illusion of control. By the time the total passed $60,000, I had everything I needed. Bank records, transfer histories, expense reports, screenshots of every suspicious transaction, a full timeline of the family theft. Melissa thought she was carefully hiding the money. In reality, she had built a perfect record of her own business betrayal. All I had to do was choose the right moment, and that moment arrived sooner than she expected. One afternoon, Melissa walked into the workshop looking unusually excited. "You're going to love this," she said, dropping her bag on the table. "What happened?" I asked. "I've been talking to a friend whose uncle invests in small businesses." My eyebrows lifted slightly. "Really?" "Yeah," she continued eagerly. "He might want to look at our company, but we'd need to show our financials." For a brief moment, I almost laughed. The irony was unbelievable. Melissa wanted to show investors the very numbers she had been secretly manipulating. I nodded thoughtfully. "That could be huge for us." "Exactly," she said. So I told him we could prepare the reports. 2 days later, we sat down together at the office table. Melissa opened her laptop. "I'll just pull the financial statements," she said casually. I watched quietly, because this was the moment I had been waiting for. As she began organizing the files, I slid a folder across the table. "What's this?" she asked. "Updated records," I said calmly. "You should probably include those too." She opened the folder. Inside were printed bank statements, highlighted transfers, detailed transaction logs, all the evidence of the business betrayal she thought was invisible. For the first time in months, Melissa went completely silent. Her eyes scanned the pages, then scanned them again. Her face slowly drained of color. I don't understand," she whispered. "You do," I said gently. The room felt strangely quiet. "I tracked every transfer," I continued, "every expense labeled as marketing or supplies that somehow ended up in your personal account." Her hands began to shake slightly. "It's not what you think." "Almost $60,000, Melissa." The number hung in the air. That was the moment the truth finally caught up with her, the moment karma arrived. Because family theft might stay hidden for a while, but business betrayal always leaves a trail. Melissa looked like she was searching for an explanation, an excuse, a way out, but there wasn't one. The numbers were clear, the evidence undeniable, and the quiet revenge I had planned didn't require yelling or threats or anger, because sometimes the most powerful moment is simply letting someone realize they've already destroyed themselves. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Melissa just stared at the papers. The evidence of her business betrayal spread across the table like a mirror she couldn't look away from. Her voice finally broke the silence. "I was going to pay it back." It was the kind of excuse people make when the truth has already caught them. Quiet, desperate, too late. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her. I simply asked the one question that had been sitting in my chest for months. "Then why didn't you tell me?" Melissa didn't answer, because the real reason was obvious. It wasn't a mistake. It was family theft. And somewhere along the way, she had convinced herself she deserved the money. Over the next few minutes, the confident sister I once trusted slowly disappeared. The charm, the easy laughter, the casual confidence, all gone. Instead, I saw someone cornered by their own choices. "Are you going to call the police?" she asked quietly. The fear in her voice was real, and honestly, I had thought about it. $60,000 isn't a small amount. But in that moment, something inside me felt surprisingly calm, because the revenge I wanted was never about destroying her life. It was about ending the lie and taking back control of mine.
I'm giving you one option. Melissa looked up quickly. You transfer every dollar back to the business. Her eyes widened. All of it. You sign documents removing yourself from the company, and you never touch the finances again. She swallowed hard. And if I don't? I met her gaze steadily. Then the records go to a lawyer. I didn't need to say anything else. The evidence spoke loudly enough. Within 2 weeks, the money was returned. Every dollar. Melissa signed the paperwork removing herself from the company. Just like that, the partnership was over. The business betrayal that nearly destroyed everything was finally finished. But the strangest part? I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Because the truth is, revenge isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about clarity, about refusing to let family theft define your future. Today, the business is still growing, slowly, honestly, without secrets. And sometimes people ask me if I regret not taking things further, if I regret not pushing harder for punishment. Maybe they expect a dramatic ending, but life rarely works that way. Sometimes karma is simply the moment someone realizes they've already lost your trust forever, and that loss is something money can never replace. So now I'll leave you with a question. If someone you trusted committed business betrayal and family theft against you, would you choose forgiveness? Or would your revenge look different?